His partner said, "The black waitress is hot," the Korean Mafia boss replied, "She's mine," before realizing it. The marble countertop was cool beneath my fingertips, but the heat of Jin-Ho Park's gaze made every nerve in my body catch fire. 6 months of waiting tables at Seoul Dynasty had taught me how he liked things: precise, elegant, invisible. That last part applied mostly to me. I'd mastered the art of disappearing. Then his business partner leaned closer and said, in Korean, a language they never suspected I understood, "The black waitress is hot." The entire dining room froze. Jin-Ho's chopsticks halted midair. His eyes lifted, sharp and dark. "She's mine," he said, reflex, possession, danger wrapped in one heartbeat. I nearly dropped a $200 bottle of wine. Not from flattery, but because I knew how bad it could be to stand out in his world. A world where power whispered in back rooms and one careless glance could end you. I should have quit that night. Instead, I smiled, poured the wine, and told myself it was just a job, right up until that lie almost got me killed. If you want to hear how one dangerous man's claim changed my entire life, hit that subscribe button now and comment below if you'd risk everything for someone who could protect you, or destroy you with a single word. My name is Zara Johnson, and 6 months ago, taking this job at Seoul Dynasty felt like winning the lottery. 3 times the pay of any other waitressing gig in the city, health insurance that actually covered something, and tips that sometimes exceeded my weekly salary at my old job. The kind of opportunity that doesn't come to girls from my neighborhood, especially not black girls with community college degrees and a sister with medical bills that could drown us both. The interview had been intense. 5 rounds of questions about everything from wine pairings to how I handled difficult customers. I later learned that difficult customers was code for men who could have someone disappeared with a phone call. But I didn't know that then. I just knew that the marble floors and crystal chandeliers of Seoul Dynasty represented escape, a way out of the cramped one-bedroom I shared with my sister Amara, a way to finally pay for her MS treatments without selling pieces of my soul to predatory lenders. Seoul Dynasty wasn't just a restaurant. It was Jin-Ho Park's kingdom. A place where he conducted business, entertained allies, and intimidated enemies beneath the thin veneer of legitimate enterprise. The entire top floor of a sleek high-rise in Koreatown, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the city look like a jewelry box spilled open in the dark. Working there meant learning rules that were never spoken aloud. Don't make eye contact with the men at the private tables. Never write down what you overhear. If someone leaves a briefcase under a table, you didn't see it. And most importantly, Jin-Ho Park is always right, always respected, always obeyed without question. I learned to read the room. To know when the soft murmur of conversation meant business was good, and when silence meant someone had just received news that would end badly for them. I learned that some nights, certain areas would be closed off, and we'd hear sounds that weren't quite shouting, weren't quite pleading, but made my skin prickle with the awareness of nearby violence. The other servers warned me. Not directly, no one spoke plainly about what Jin-Ho Park really did, but in sidelong glances and aborted sentences. Just keep your head down, they'd say. Don't be memorable. As if being the only black woman in an upscale Korean restaurant didn't make me memorable by default. What they didn't know was that I'd grown up in the shadow of men who thought power meant fear. My father had been one of them before a rival crew put 3 bullets in his chest when I was 12. I'd spent my teenage years watching my mother drift through a haze of grief and pills until she followed him to the grave, leaving me to raise Amara. I knew danger when I saw it. Could smell it like ozone before a storm. Jin-Ho Park was dangerous in a way that made my father's crew look like playground bullies. He moved through the world with the quiet confidence of someone who had never been told no. Who never had to raise his voice to be obeyed. His presence changed the air pressure in a room. For 6 months, I'd been invisible to him. Just another server in the black uniform dress, hair pulled back tight, eyes down, voice modulated to be heard but not remembered. I poured his drinks, served his food, and existed in his peripheral vision like a ghost. Until that night. The night his partner made that comment, and Jin-ho claimed me without even knowing my name. I had been studying Korean since getting the job. Not because I had some fascination with K-dramas or K-pop like some of my friends, but because I knew information was survival. Understanding what was being said around me, about me, might someday save my life. I'd learned enough to follow conversations, to catch the important words: money, drugs, territory, threats. I never let on that I understood. That knowledge was my only advantage in a world where I had none. That night, Jin-ho had 4 guests, all Korean men with the same expensive watches and the same calculating eyes. I served their drinks, whiskey for Jin-ho, always Macallan 25, never anything less. Brought their appetizers, and faded into the background as they discussed business in a mixture of English and Korean. I was pouring wine when his partner, Lee, I think his name was, looked me up and down and made that comment. The casual objectification wasn't new. The response was, "She's mine." 2 words that changed everything. Jin-ho looked as surprised as I felt, like the words had escaped before he could stop them. Our eyes locked for just a moment. The first time he'd ever really looked at me, and something passed between us. Recognition, maybe. Or the shared understanding that a line had been crossed. I finished pouring the wine, my hands steady despite the adrenaline singing through my veins, and retreated to the kitchen. My manager saw my face and raised an eyebrow. I just shook my head. Some things couldn't be explained, especially not to someone who would side with Jin-ho in any dispute, no matter how wrong he might be. That should have been the end of it. One awkward moment, forgotten by morning. But 3 days later, Jin-ho arrived alone. He sat at the bar, something he never did, and asked for me specifically. Not by name, because he didn't know it yet, but as, the server from Tuesday. I approached with my professional smile fixed in place, notepad ready. "Good evening, Mr. Park. What can I get for you tonight?" "Your name," he said, and it wasn't a request. "Zara. Zara Johnson." He repeated it, testing the sound of it on his tongue. Zara. Then he ordered a whiskey and asked me to join him. I glanced at my manager, who nodded almost imperceptibly. This wasn't a request I could refuse. So I sat on the barstool next to one of the most powerful men in the city and tried to look like my heart wasn't trying to break through my ribs. "I want to apologize," he said, which was the last thing I expected. What my associate said was disrespectful. What I said in response was. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Inappropriate. I didn't know what to say to that. "Thank you. It's fine." I went with honesty. "I've heard worse." "That doesn't make it acceptable." He studied me with those dark eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. "How long have you worked here, Zara?" 6 months. "And before that?" 2 other restaurants downtown. A cafe near Columbia before that. He nodded, like he was filing away this information. "You're very good at your job." Efficient. Observant. It wasn't a compliment. It was an assessment. "Thank you," I said, because what else could I say? "You understand Korean." It wasn't a question. My blood went cold. Don't lie to me." His voice was soft, but the command in it was unmistakable. "I saw your reaction when Minjun spoke. The slight tension in your shoulders. The flicker in your eyes. You understood him. I'd made a rookie mistake. Let my guard down for a fraction of a second. I've picked up a little. Working here." Jin-ho smiled. It transformed his face, softened the sharp edges of his cheekbones, the severe line of his mouth. It would have been disarming if I hadn't seen those same lips order a man removed from the restaurant 2 months ago, a man who never came back. "A little is useful," he said. "A lot would be more so." That was the moment I should have run. Should have made an excuse, finished my shift, and never returned. Instead, I sat there and let him offer me a job. Not as a server, but as his personal assistant. Triple the salary. An apartment in his building. Health insurance that would cover all of Amara's treatments, not just the basic ones. All I had to do was be his eyes and ears. Translate conversations he wasn't meant to hear. Report on meetings where people thought they were speaking freely because the black waitress couldn't possibly understand Korean. I told myself I was doing it for Amara. For the sister whose MS had progressed faster than anyone expected, who at 23 was already using a cane on bad days, whose medical bills had consumed every spare dollar I'd earned since our mother died. But part of me, a part one didn't want to acknowledge, was doing it for the way Jin-ho looked at me. Like I was valuable. Like I mattered. Like I was seen. I said yes. And that decision pulled me into Jin-ho Park's orbit like a moon caught by planetary gravity. Inescapable, predetermined, governed by forces beyond my control. The first month passed in a blur of new responsibilities. I still worked at Seoul Dynasty, but now I had access to the private rooms, the meetings, the moments that happened behind closed doors. I wore an earpiece that allowed Jin-ho to communicate with me, asking for clarification on things I heard, directing me to pay attention to specific conversations. I learned that Jin-ho's legitimate businesses, the restaurant, the nightclub, the import-export company, were just the surface. Beneath them ran rivers of money from less savory enterprises. Protection rackets disguised as security services. Gambling operations hidden in plain sight. Prescription drugs diverted from legal channels to street sales. I tried not to think about it. Tried to focus on the fact that Amara was getting better care than she'd ever had. That we'd moved from our cramped apartment to a spacious two-bedroom in Jin-ho's building, with doormen and security cameras and the kind of safety I'd never known. I told myself I wasn't hurting anyone. Just listening. Just translating. Just being present. Until the night I heard something I wasn't supposed to hear. I was serving drinks in the private room where Jin-ho was meeting with representatives from another organization, a Chinese group looking to expand into his territory. The conversation was tense, conducted in a mixture of English, Korean, and Mandarin. I caught fragments about shipping routes, percentages, distribution networks. Then one of the Chinese men said something in Mandarin that made Jin-ho's expression harden. I didn't speak Mandarin, but I didn't need to. The threat was clear from the tone, from the sudden stillness that fell over the room. Jin-ho responded in perfect, calm English. I think we're done here. As I cleared glasses after they left, Jin-ho stopped me with a hand on my wrist. What did you hear? I don't speak Mandarin, I said. But you heard everything else. His grip tightened slightly. Not painful, but unmistakable. Tell me. So I did. I repeated the conversation verbatim, from the initial pleasantries to the final breakdown. Jin-ho listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he released my wrist and nodded. Good. This is exactly why I hired you. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. A bonus. For your discretion. The envelope contained $10,000 in cash. More money than I'd ever held in my hands at once. I can't accept this, I said, trying to hand it back. Jin-ho pushed my hand away gently. Yes, you can. You're part of my organization now, Zara. That means you share in its successes. His eyes held mine. And its loyalties. I took the money. Told myself it was for Amara's treatments. For our future. For security. But as I watched Jin-ho leave, flanked by his security team, I knew I'd crossed a line. I wasn't just observing anymore. I was complicit. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the balcony of our new apartment, staring at the city lights, the envelope of cash on the table beside me. Amara found me there around 3 a.m., moving slowly with her cane. "Bad night?" she asked, lowering herself carefully into the chair next to mine. "Just thinking. About your boss." She was too perceptive, my sister. Always had been. "The way you talk about him, it's different. He's just my employer, Era." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me for a second. "You've never accepted help from anyone. Not after Dad died, not when Mom was spiraling, not when I got diagnosed. You took on everything yourself." She gestured around at our new apartment. "Now suddenly we're living in a luxury building and you're working for a man who gives you envelopes full of cash. That's not just employment, Z." "He's helping us," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Why?" Amara pressed. "Men like that don't help people out of kindness." I didn't have an answer. At least, not one I was ready to admit to myself, let alone my sister. The following week, I was scheduled to attend a business dinner with Jin-ho at a rival's restaurant. Not as a server, but as his companion. He had clothing delivered to my apartment, a black dress that probably cost more than 3 months' rent at our old place, shoes with red soles that I'd only ever seen on celebrities, a small clutch purse that felt like butter in my hands. "I can't wear this," I told him when he called to confirm I'd received everything. "Why not?" "Because." I struggled to articulate all the reasons. "Because it sends the wrong message. About what I am to you." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "And what are you to me, Zara?" Heat crept up my neck. "Your employee. Is that all?" The question hung between us, loaded with possibilities I wasn't prepared to consider. "Yes," I said finally. "That's all." He accepted that with a grace I hadn't expected. "Then consider the dress part of your work uniform. I need you to blend in at this establishment. To be underestimated." So I wore the dress. Did my makeup with more care than usual. Let my hair down from its usual tight bun. When I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The woman staring back at me looked confident, sophisticated, like she belonged in Jin-ho Park's world. Amara whistled when I emerged from my bedroom. "Damn, Z. You clean up nice." "It's just for work," I insisted, but the flutter in my stomach suggested otherwise. Jin-ho's driver collected me at 7. The car was a sleek black Bentley with windows tinted so dark they looked solid. The interior smelled of leather and something subtle, sandalwood, maybe. Jin-ho was already inside, dressed in a suit that made him look even more dangerous than usual. His eyes widened slightly when I slid into the seat beside him, a micro-expression that vanished almost immediately. "You look beautiful," he said, with a simplicity that felt more genuine than any flowery compliment. "Thank you." I smoothed the dress over my knees, suddenly self-conscious. "So what's the plan for tonight?" Jin-ho briefed me on the dinner as the car wove through evening traffic. We were meeting with David Chen, a business rival who controlled several nightclubs and restaurants in the area. The official reason was to discuss potential collaboration. The real reason was to gather intelligence on Chen's operation. "He won't expect you to understand Mandarin or Cantonese," Jin-ho explained. "Which gives us an advantage. Listen for names, locations, dates. Anything that might indicate his plans." "And if he catches me?" I asked, the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightening. Jin-ho's expression hardened. "He won't harm you. Not if he wants to continue breathing." The casual way he referenced potential violence should have terrified me. Instead, it sent a disturbing thrill through my body. To be protected by someone like Jin-ho Park, it was like having a tiger on a leash. Powerful, exhilarating, and one snap away from disaster. Chen's restaurant was opulent in a way that made Seoul Dynasty look almost understated. Gold leaf on the ceiling. Jade statues in alcoves. A waterfall feature that ran the entire length of one wall. Every surface gleamed with wealth and power. Chen himself was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with a boyish face that belied the calculation in his eyes. He greeted Jin Ho with the practiced warmth of rivals who had temporarily shelved their differences, then turned his attention to me. "And who is this vision?" he asked, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips. Before I could respond, Jin Ho's arm slid around my waist, pulling me subtly closer to him. "This is Zara. My personal assistant." The possessive gesture wasn't lost on Chen. His eyebrows rose slightly, and a knowing smile curved his lips. "Of course. How progressive of you, Jin Ho." The implication was clear. In Chen's mind, personal assistant was a euphemism. A polite fiction to explain why Jin Ho had brought a black woman in an expensive dress to a business dinner. I should have been offended. Would have been, under other circumstances. But something about Jin Ho's arm around my waist, the warmth of his body beside mine, made me lean into the assumption rather than reject it. Throughout dinner, Chen alternated between English and Mandarin, clearly believing I couldn't follow the latter. Jin Ho played along, responding in English regardless of which language Chen used, as if translating for my benefit. I smiled, sipped my wine, and listened. Caught fragments about shipment schedules, distribution disputes, territory negotiations. Nothing concrete, but enough to piece together that Chen was planning to expand into an area Jin Ho considered his. Halfway through the meal, Chen's phone rang. He answered in rapid Mandarin, his expression darkening as the conversation progressed. When he hung up, he switched to Korean, apparently assuming that if I didn't speak Mandarin, Korean would be equally incomprehensible. "There's a problem at the docks," he told Jin Ho. "Your people are interfering with my shipment." Jin Ho's expression remained neutral. "My people are exactly where they're supposed to be. Perhaps your information is incorrect." Chen's eyes narrowed. "I don't make mistakes about my business, Park. Pull your men back, or this pleasant dinner will become considerably less so." I kept my face carefully blank, but my pulse raced. The conversation had shifted from business rivalry to outright threat in the space of seconds. Jin Ho sipped his wine, seemingly unconcerned. "Let's not spoil the evening with misunderstandings." He glanced at me, then back at Chen. "Why don't we step outside to discuss this privately?" They excused themselves, leaving me alone at the table with instructions to order dessert and enjoy myself. As soon as they were out of sight, N's assistant, a severe woman in her 40s who had been silently observing from a nearby table, moved to join me. "First time at one of these dinners?" she asked in English, her accent crisp and British. "Is it that obvious?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Jin Ho doesn't usually bring women to business meetings. Certainly not women who look like you. The thinly veiled racism made my jaw clench, but I kept my expression pleasant. "I suppose I should be flattered to be the exception." "Flattered isn't the word I'd use." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Men like Jin Ho and David, they don't have partners. They have possessions. Beautiful things they acquire and discard when they lose interest." She glanced pointedly at my dress. "The smarter ones negotiate terms up front. What they'll receive when the affair inevitably ends." "I'm his assistant," I said firmly. "Nothing more." Her laugh was soft and condescending. "Of course you are. And I'm just Mr. Chen's secretary." She pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "When you realize what you've gotten yourself into, call me. I can help you transition to a more stable position." I took the card reflexively, too stunned by her presumption to refuse. By the time I recovered my composure, Jin Ho and Chen had returned. Both looked calm, but there was a tension in Jin Ho's shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Ready to go?" he asked me, his tone pleasant but his eyes communicating urgency. I nodded and stood, gathering my clutch. Chen kissed my hand again in farewell, his grip lingering just a moment too long. Such a pleasure to meet you, Zara. I hope we'll see more of each other. In the car, Jin-ho was silent for several minutes, staring out the window at the passing city. Finally, he asked, "What did Chen's assistant want?" I hesitated, then decided honesty was the safest approach. "She thought I was your mistress. Offered to help me find a more stable position when you got tired of me." Jin-ho's laugh was unexpected, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his face. "Did she now? How considerate of her. She also suggested I negotiate terms for when you discard me." The amusement faded from his expression. "And what did you tell her?" "That I'm your assistant. Nothing more." Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, maybe. "And is that what you want to be, Zara?" "Nothing more." The question sent heat spreading through my body. We were veering into dangerous territory, crossing lines I'd promised myself I wouldn't cross. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to give the safe answer. "I don't know," I admitted. "What do you want me to be?" Jin-ho reached across the space between us, his fingers brushing my cheek with a gentleness that made my breath catch. "More," he said simply. "But only if you want that too." I should have pulled away. Should have established boundaries, maintained professionalism. Instead, I leaned into his touch, my eyes closing briefly. "This is complicated," I whispered. "Yes." His hand moved to cup my jaw, thumb tracing the line of my lower lip. "But I've never been interested in simple things." The kiss, when it came, was inevitable, like gravity, like tide, like all the forces of nature that can't be denied. His lips were soft but insistent, claiming more than just my mouth. I told myself it was just physical attraction. Just the adrenaline of the evening, the danger, the power dynamics at play. But deep down, I knew it was more complicated than that. Jin-ho Park had seen me, really seen me, in a way no one else ever had. He'd recognized my intelligence, my resilience, my worth, when most people just saw a black waitress, invisible and interchangeable. That night changed everything. Crossed a line we couldn't uncross. And set in motion events that would eventually force me to choose between the man who had given me security and the family I'd spent my life protecting. 3 days after that kiss, Amara's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. I found her on the bathroom floor, unable to stand, her vision blurred, her speech slurred. The fear that gripped me was primal, paralyzing. I called 911, then Jin-ho. He met us at the hospital, arriving seconds after the ambulance delivered us to the emergency room. I was surprised to see him. I'd called only to explain why I wouldn't be at work, but his presence was immediately transformative. Doctors appeared faster. Private rooms became available. Specialists were consulted. I sat in the hospital waiting room, still in my pajamas, while Jin-ho spoke with administrators in low, authoritative tones. When he returned, he sat beside me and took my hand. "They're running tests now. The best neurologist in the city is reviewing her case." "How did you?" I began, then stopped. Of course Jin-ho had connections. Had influence. Had the power to make things happen with a word or a threat or a promise. "Thank you," I said instead. He nodded, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. "She's important to you. That makes her important to me." The tests revealed what we'd feared. Amara's MS was progressing more rapidly than expected. She needed a new treatment regimen, more aggressive therapy, potentially experimental drugs that weren't covered by insurance. The cost was staggering. Even with Jin-ho's generous salary, even with the bonuses, I couldn't afford it. Not without going into debt that would take decades to repay. Jin-ho offered to pay for everything. All of it. Without hesitation, without conditions. "Why?" I asked, sitting beside Amara's hospital bed while she slept, the steady beep of monitors the only sound in the room. Why would you do that for us? He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the city lights visible through the hospital window. When I was 16, my mother got sick. Cancer. My father had money, connections, everything needed to get her the best care. His jaw tightened. But he was too proud to use those connections. Too concerned with appearance, with what people would say if he pulled strings. She died waiting for appointments with specialists who might have saved her. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes intense. I promised myself I would never let pride or appearance stop me from helping someone I care about. And I care about you, Zara. More than I should, perhaps. The admission hung between us, fragile and dangerous. Jin-ho Park, the man who controlled half of Koreatown with an iron fist, who could order death with a nod, was admitting vulnerability. To me. I care about you too, I whispered. And that terrifies me. As it should. His smile was sad, knowing. Caring for someone like me comes with risks. I've never been afraid of risk, I said. Just of losing the people I love. His hand found mine in the dim hospital room, fingers intertwining. I won't let you lose her. I promise you that. I believed him. God help me, I believed him. Amara stabilized, but the road ahead was long. She would need ongoing treatment, therapy, monitoring. Jin-ho arranged for the best care, the best doctors, even a home health aide to help when I couldn't be there. I continued working at Seoul Dynasty, continued serving as Jin-ho's eyes and ears, but now there was more between us. Stolen moments in his office. His hand at the small of my back, guiding me through crowded rooms. Nights when he would appear at my apartment door with takeout and a bottle of wine, and we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. I learned that Jin-ho had been born in Seoul but raised in New York after his father expanded the family business to America. That he'd studied business at Columbia before being pulled into the family enterprise. That he loved jazz and hated opera, preferred dogs to cats, and had a weakness for spicy food that made his eyes water. He learned about my childhood in a neighborhood where gunshots were as common as sirens. About my father, who had loved me fiercely but chosen a life that got him killed. About my mother, who had retreated into prescription pills until she faded away completely. About how I'd raised Amara since she was 13, determined to give her the stability I'd never had. It was the most honest relationship I'd ever had, despite being built on a foundation of half-truths and omissions. We never directly discussed the illegal aspects of his business. Never acknowledged the violence that lurked at the edges of his empire. It was the elephant in the room, growing larger and more imposing with each passing day. Then came the night that changed everything. I was working late at Seoul Dynasty, overseeing a private dinner in one of the back rooms. Jin-ho was meeting with representatives from a Japanese organization, potential allies in an ongoing territorial dispute with Chen's group. The evening was progressing smoothly until one of Jin-ho's men burst into the room, his face pale. He whispered something in Jin-ho's ear that made him go completely still, a stillness I'd learned to recognize as deadly. Jin-ho excused himself, gesturing for me to follow. In the hallway, his expression was carved from stone. "There's been an incident at your building," he said, his voice controlled but tight. "Amara's fine, but she was approached by Chen's men." Ice flooded my veins. Approached how? They claimed to be delivering food she'd ordered. When she said she hadn't ordered anything, they forced their way into the apartment. Asked her questions about me, about you, about our relationship. Rage and terror warred within me. Did they hurt her? No. My security team intercepted them before it escalated. But the intent was clear. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. This was a message. From Chen to me. Using my sister as a pawn. My voice shook with anger. Because of me. Because of us. Jin-ho's expression softened slightly. Because of me, Zara. Not you. This is my responsibility. Where is she now? I've moved her to a secure location. With medical staff, security. She's safe. But for how long? The unasked question hung between us. I want to see her, I said. Jin-ho nodded. Of course. I'll take you to her now. The secure location turned out to be a penthouse in a building Jin-ho owned on the Upper East Side. The elevator required a key card and opened directly into a foyer guarded by two men with the unmistakable bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. Amara was in the living room, pale but unharmed, watching television with forced casualness. When she saw me, she stood, with difficulty, leaning on her cane, and hugged me fiercely. I'm okay, she said before I could ask. Just shaken up. What happened? Exactly. She told me the story, how two men had appeared at our door claiming to have a food delivery. How they'd pushed past her when she'd opened the door to explain they had the wrong apartment. How they'd asked questions about Jin-ho, about me, about what I might have told her regarding his business. They weren't going to hurt me, she said. At least, I don't think so. They seemed more interested in information than intimidation. But then Mr. Park's security team arrived, and things got intense. I could imagine. Jin-ho's men weren't known for their gentle approach to problem solving. You'll stay here until this is resolved, Jin-ho said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a suggestion. And how exactly do you plan to resolve this? I asked, anger making me bold. Because if it involves more violence, more escalation, then you're just putting a target on all our backs. Jin-ho's expression didn't change, but I saw a muscle tick in his jaw. This situation requires a response, Zara. Chen needs to understand that crossing this line has consequences. And what about the next line? And the one after that? Where does it end, Jin-ho? He had no answer for that. Because we both knew the truth, it didn't end. Not in his world. There was always another rival, another territory dispute, another reason for violence. That night, after Amara had gone to sleep in one of the penthouse's bedrooms, Jin-ho and I stood on the balcony overlooking the city. The light spread out before us like a universe of stars brought down to earth. I never wanted this for you, he said quietly. For either of you. I know. I can send you away. Both of you. Somewhere safe, far from here. New identities, new lives. Enough money to never worry about Amara's treatment again. The offer was tempting. So tempting it made my chest ache. A clean break. A fresh start. Security without the constant shadow of violence. Is that what you want? I asked, not looking at him. His hand found mine on the balcony railing, fingers intertwining. No. It's the last thing I want. But I want you safe more than I want you with me. I turned to face him, really looking at him in the glow of the city lights. This dangerous man who had claimed me with two careless words. Who had given me security and put me in danger in the same breath. There's another option, I said slowly. What's that? Change. Real change. Not just for show, not just on the surface. Transform your businesses. Make them legitimate. Step away from the things that put us all at risk. Jin-ho's laugh was soft, without humor. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's necessary. I squeezed his hand. You're smart enough to make money legally. Connected enough to transition without losing everything. Respected enough that others would follow your lead. And if they don't? If Chen and others see it as weakness? Then you deal with that when it happens. But at least you'd be building something that doesn't require constant violence to maintain. Something that wouldn't put people I love in danger just for being connected to you. He was quiet for a long time, his gaze returning to the city spread out below us. Finally, he said, it would take time. Years, maybe. I have time, I said. We have time. If that's what you want. Jin-ho turned to me, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights. What I want is you. Safe. Happy. By my side while I build something better than what my father left me. Then let's do that, I whispered. Together. The kiss that followed sealed a promise. Not just between a man and a woman who had found each other against impossible odds, but between two people determined to create something new from the ashes of old ways. The transition wasn't immediate. Couldn't be, without creating the very power vacuum that would endanger us all. But it began that night, with a decision made on a balcony overlooking the city that had shaped us both. Jin-ho started with his legitimate businesses, expanding them, investing more resources and attention. Seoul Dynasty became the flagship of a restaurant group that eventually included 5 high-end establishments across the city. The import-export business grew, focusing on luxury goods and specialty foods. He acquired real estate, developed properties in neighborhoods that needed investment without displacing the people who lived there. Gradually, carefully, he began distancing himself from the shadier aspects of his empire. Not all at once, that would have been suicide. But in calculated moves that minimized blowback. There were challenges. Chen saw the changes as weakness, made plays for territory Jin-ho had previously controlled. There were tense meetings, veiled threats, moments when violence seemed inevitable. Through it all, I stood beside him. Not as his assistant anymore, but as his partner. I used my understanding of both worlds, his Korean business circles and the black communities many of his properties served, to help build bridges. To create something sustainable. Something worth protecting. Amara's health stabilized with the new treatments. She enrolled in college, studying graphic design, her creativity finding an outlet despite her physical limitations. She moved back to our apartment once the immediate threat had passed, but with enhanced security that became simply part of our lives. 6 months after that night on the balcony, Jin-ho took me to Korea. Not for business, but to meet his grandfather. The family patriarch who had started the empire with a single restaurant in Seoul decades ago. I was terrified. Certain this elderly Korean man would take one look at me, black, American, from a background worlds away from their dynasty, and reject me immediately. Instead, he studied me with eyes so similar to Jin-ho's it was startling, then said something in Korean that made Jin-ho smile. What did he say? I asked. He said you have the eyes of someone who sees clearly. Who doesn't flinch from truth. Jin-ho squeezed my hand. He approves. That trip changed something between us. Standing in the country where Jin-ho's story began, seeing the places that had shaped his family's legacy, I understood more clearly what he was risking by changing course. The weight of expectation he was defying. The courage it took to build something new. 1 year after Chen's men threatened Amara, Jin-ho proposed. Not in some elaborate, showy way, but quietly, on the balcony of the penthouse that had become our home. With a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a simple band with a single perfect diamond. I can't promise you a normal life, he said. I can't erase my past or pretend I'm someone I'm not. But I can promise that every day, I'll choose you. Choose us. Choose the future we're building together over the past I inherited. I said yes. Not because he'd given me security or saved my sister or offered me a world I'd never imagined for myself. But because in his eyes, I was never invisible. Never just the black waitress. Never just an employee or an asset or a possession. I was his partner. His equal. His choice, made every day despite the cost. Our wedding was small, intimate. Amara stood beside me, healthier than she'd been in years. Jin-ho's grandfather flew in from Korea, bringing with him blessings and traditions that we wove together with my own family's heritage. 2 years later, as I stand in the offices of the Jin-ho Park Foundation, our newest venture, dedicated to providing medical assistance to families struggling with chronic illnesses. I can hardly believe the journey that brought us here. The marble countertop of the reception desk is cool beneath my fingertips as I arrange brochures for our newest program. So similar to that countertop at Seoul Dynasty where it all began, yet representing something so different. Jin-ho appears in the doorway of his office, our 1-year-old daughter in his arms. She has his eyes, my curls, and a determination that is entirely her own. "Ready to go home?" he asks. I nod, gathering my things. As we leave the building, our foundation, our legacy, I think about that moment years ago. When his partner said I was hot, and Jin-ho claimed me without thinking. "She's mine." 2 words that changed everything. That could have destroyed us both, but instead became the beginning of something neither of us could have imagined. Not possession. Not control. But belonging. Choice. A future built from the wreckage of our pasts. And if you're wondering if it was worth it, the danger, the fear, the constant vigilance that still shadows parts of our lives, my answer is yes. 1,000 times yes. Because sometimes, the most dangerous words in the world are exactly the ones you need to hear to find your way home. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button now and share in the comments if you believe love can transform even the most dangerous situations. Because sometimes, the most unexpected connections lead to the most powerful changes.